You don't notice it at first. It slips in quietly, between the sound of your own footsteps and the faint rustle of leaves dragging across damp ground. The air feels heavier than it should, pressing against your skin like something alive. There's a metallic taste sitting on the back of your tongue, subtle, but wrong, like you've been breathing in something that doesn't belong in your lungs. Then you hear it. A distant siren. Long. Warped. Stretching across the empty landscape like it got lost on its way to somewhere that actually matters. You stop. Because there shouldn't be a siren out here. No city. No roads. No reason. Just trees. And that sound. You tell yourself it's old infrastructure. Maybe a broken warning system. Maybe wind forcing air through something hollow. Your brain is doing its job, patching logic over discomfort like duct tape over a crack. But the more you listen, the more it doesn't sound random. There's a pattern, a rhythm, almost like, no, you shake it off. That's ridiculous. You reach for your phone. No signal, of course, because why would you have signal right now? The siren cuts off, instantly. No fade, no echo. Just nothing. And that's worse. Because now you can hear your own breathing. Too loud. Too fast. Each inhale scraping against your throat like sandpaper. Your heartbeat starts to pulse in your ears, filling the silence with something primal. Then, a voice. Hey. It's faint. Distorted. Like it's being pushed through an old speaker buried underground. But you recognize it. You know that voice. It says your name. Clearly this time. Closer. Your body reacts before your mind does. You turn. Just slightly. Just enough to confirm what you already think you know. Because it has to be someone. Right? That instinct. That tiny, stupid human need to respond when you're called. That's the moment you make your first mistake. Because that sound? That wasn't random. And that voice? It didn't come from a person. It came from something that has already decided you're worth the effort. That scenario you just imagined, that wasn't fiction. It's a pattern. A recorded behavior observed in encounters with an entity that doesn't hunt with claws or speed, but with sound. Welcome. You're now inside the documented case file of Siren Head. And what you just experienced? That was the safe version. Tonight, we're not just telling a story. We're dissecting a system. A predator that doesn't chase you. It waits for you to listen. You probably want this to be simple. A creature. A thing. Something with a beginning, a body, and, if you're lucky, an end. That would make this easier to process. It isn't. Because Siren Head doesn't behave like something that was born. It behaves like something that was installed. The modern explanation is convenient. Too convenient. An artist creates an image. The internet spreads it. A myth is born. Case closed. Except, that doesn't explain the consistency. Across reports, forums, obscure threads, late-night voice recordings, you see the same details repeating, the same height, the same structure, the same sound patterns. Not similar. Identical. That's not how imagination usually works. Human fear evolves. It mutates. It exaggerates. This stays on model. Which leads to the first uncomfortable possibility. What if Siren Head wasn't created, but recognized? A pattern that already existed, waiting for the right language, the right image, the right era to finally be noticed. Because think about its design. Towering frame, metallic resonance, broadcast systems for a head. It doesn't look ancient. It looks infrastructural, like something that belongs next to power lines, near abandoned roads, blending into the skeleton of modern civilization. And that raises a second theory, not older than us, but built around us. A parasitic presence that adapts to whatever we build, using our own systems as camouflage. Sirens, radios, emergency alerts, things you are conditioned to trust. Which would explain why it doesn't need eyes, or a face, or anything remotely biological. Because it doesn't interact with the world the way you do. It doesn't need to see you. It only needs to reach you. And sound travels. Farther than sight. Faster than thought. There's no confirmed anatomy beyond what's been observed. No organs. No visible joints functioning the way they should. Its limbs bend at angles that suggest structure. But not life. When it moves, it doesn't walk. It repositions. Like a signal jumping between towers. And that's where things stop being metaphorical. Because if Siren Head is a system, then every encounter isn't random. It's a connection. You don't run into it. You get picked up, like a frequency your brain accidentally tuned into. Which brings us to the most dangerous implication. If it's a system, then there might not be just one. Not in the way you're hoping. Multiple sightings have never confirmed interaction between entities. No communication, no coordination, no overlap. But they don't need to coordinate. Radio towers don't talk to each other. They just broadcast. And anything within range receives. So the real question isn't, how many are there? It's, how many are within range of you? Right now? Because if this thing isn't a creature, if it's a mechanism embedded into the environment itself, then avoiding it isn't about distance. It's about exposure. And you've already proven something important. You listened. You like to think your senses protect you. Sight warns you. Touch confirms danger. Instinct tells you when to run. But hearing? Hearing doesn't wait for permission. It bypasses logic. It skips negotiation. It goes straight to reaction. And Siren Head understands that better than you do. Because it doesn't use sound the way animals do. It doesn't growl. It doesn't scream. It broadcasts. Not noise. Not even language. Signals. Structured. Intentional. Designed to trigger something older than thought. You hear a siren and your body tightens before your brain asks why. Emergency. Movement. Attention. That response isn't learned. It's inherited. Now layer something else on top of that. A voice. Not just any voice. A familiar one. Your name. Spoken in a tone your memory recognizes instantly. Not because it's accurate, but because it's yours. That's the first fracture. Because at that moment, you're not hearing Siren Head. You're hearing yourself remembering someone else. And your brain trusts that. There's a phenomenon called auditory pareidolia. Your mind turning random noise into recognizable patterns. Words in static. Voices in the wind. Meaning where none exists. Harmless. Usually. Now imagine something that doesn't create the voice, but selects the exact pattern your brain is most likely to accept as real. Not imitation. Optimization. Siren Head doesn't guess what will get your attention. It uses what already works. Your memory becomes the library. Your emotions become the filter. And the output? A perfect trigger. That's why the distortion matters. The slight warping. The mechanical edge. The almost but not quite quality of the sound. It keeps your brain engaged. Because the more something feels slightly wrong, the harder your mind works to correct it. You lean in. You focus. You try to understand. And in doing that, you give it more time, more attention, more access. This isn't just about hearing something. It's about being pulled into the act of listening. Because once you engage, you've already stepped into its range. Sound defines space. You move toward it. You orient yourself around it. You measure distance through it. And Siren Head controls that entire system. It can place the sound far away, safe enough to approach. It can move it closer, slowly, carefully, guiding you without ever needing to touch you. And when the sound disappears, that's not a glitch. That's the final adjustment. Because your brain does something dangerous in silence. It fills the gap. You turn, you scan, you try to relocate the source, and in that moment, you expose your back, your blind spot, your uncertainty. That's when it closes the distance. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. Because by then, you're already inside the signal. And here's the part you won't like. You can try to ignore it. You can tell yourself it's fake. You can even cover your ears. It doesn't matter. Because the moment you recognize the voice, the moment you thought, I know that sound, you weren't reacting to Siren Head anymore. You were reacting to yourself. And that's a system you can't turn off. You're still thinking like this is a chase, predator, prey, distance, speed. That's a comforting model. It's also wrong. Because Siren Head doesn't hunt by closing the gap. It hunts by redefining where the gap is. The process is structured, repeated, almost clinical. Phase 1 begins before you even realize you're involved. A distant signal, not threatening, not urgent enough to trigger panic, just present. A siren echoing somewhere it shouldn't be, a broadcast bleeding into an empty space. It doesn't demand your attention. It earns it. You notice it. You question it. You hesitate. That hesitation, that's the hook. Phase 2 is where it becomes personal. The signal shifts. Patterns emerge. Rhythm tightens. The randomness dissolves into something intentional. And then, a voice. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just enough. It says something familiar. A word. A phrase. Your name. And suddenly this isn't background noise anymore. It's directed at you. Now your position changes. Not physically, not yet, but cognitively. You're no longer a bystander. You're a participant. And that's when phase 3 begins. You move. Maybe just a step. Maybe a turn. Maybe you lean forward trying to isolate the direction. It doesn't matter how small the action is. Because from that moment on, your behavior becomes predictable. Humans triangulate sound instinctively. You adjust. You correct. You seek clarity. Siren Head doesn't need to guess what you'll do next. It's already factored in. And here's where the rules start breaking. Something that large should be loud. Branches snapping. Ground shifting. Air displaced. But when it repositions, there's nothing. No footsteps. No friction. No warning. Because it's not moving through space the way you expect. It's updating its position relative to you. Like a signal recalibrating to maintain optimal reception. Which leads to the most dangerous variable in the entire encounter. Silence. At some point, the sound stops. Completely. No fade. No distortion. Just absence. And your brain hates that. Because now you've lost your reference point. So you compensate. You turn around. You scan the environment. You try to relocate the source. You expose every angle you were subconsciously protecting. That's not panic. That's design. Because phase 4 doesn't require sound. By then, you're already within reach. And the final step? It's not dramatic. No roar. No final warning. Just a shift. A presence where there wasn't one before. A structure that wasn't there a second ago. Now towering over you, blocking out what little light you had left. You won't hear it arrive. Because arrival implies distance. and distance stopped meaning anything the moment you engaged. This entire process isn't about speed. It's about compliance. You followed the signal. You trusted the pattern. You completed the sequence. And Siren Head, it never had to chase you. Because from the very first sound, you were already walking in the right direction. Let's be honest. If Siren Head existed a few hundred years ago, it wouldn't work nearly as well. Not because people were smarter, but because they were quieter. No constant alerts. No notifications. No invisible systems calling for attention every few seconds. Back then, if you heard your name in the middle of nowhere, you ran. Now, you check. You hesitate. You rationalize. You assume there's always a reason, a system, a source. Because you've been trained to respond. Not survive. Think about it. Your phone buzzes. You look. A notification pings. You react. A voice calls your name. You turn. No verification. No delay. Just immediate compliance. Siren Head doesn't introduce a new behavior. It exploits an existing one. And that's what makes it efficient. Because in the modern world, attention is currency. Everything wants it. Everything competes for it. Apps, alerts, messages, voices. Most of them are harmless. Most of them. Siren Head is what happens when something isn't. It doesn't need to break your habits. It just needs to insert itself into them. That's why its design feels so specific. Sirens, broadcasts, distorted announcements. It mimics systems you already trust. Emergency warnings, public alerts, infrastructure signals. Things designed to override your hesitation. Things designed to make you act immediately. Now add something personal, a voice you recognize, a tone that feels urgent, but familiar. You don't question it. You prioritize it. Because ignoring it feels wrong, almost dangerous. And that's the trap. Because the one time you shouldn't respond is the one time you absolutely will. Let's compare. Slender Man stands still. You see it? You panic. Visual trigger. Immediate fear. Skinwalkers mimic voices too. But there's usually something off. Enough folklore, enough warning signs to make you hesitate. Siren Head, it removes hesitation. It doesn't scare you into running. It guides you into approaching. That's not horror. That's design. Efficient. Scalable. Repeatable. Which brings us to the part people don't like to admit. You are not being hunted because you're weak. You're being hunted because you're responsive. Because you care. Because you answer. Because when something calls your name, you don't ignore it. And here's the irony. If you trained yourself to stop reacting, to ignore every sound, every voice, every signal, you might survive longer. But at that point, you're not functioning like a human anymore. You're isolating, disconnecting, shutting down the very systems that keep you, you. So the real question isn't, can you survive Siren Head?
Oh God! Oh God!
It's,
Run!
how much of yourself are you willing to lose? To even try? Because this isn't a fight. It's a trade. Your awareness. For your humanity. And based on everything you've done so far, you've already made your choice. By now, you're probably asking the only question that matters. How do you survive it? The answer is simple. Uncomfortably simple. Don't respond. Don't follow the sound. Don't turn when you hear your name. Don't try to confirm what you already suspect. Treat every signal like a trap. Because in this case, it is. In theory, that's all it takes. In reality, that's where things fall apart. Because survival here isn't physical. It's psychological. You're not fighting something stronger than you. You're fighting something that understands your behavior better than you do. You will want to check. You will want to be sure. Because ignoring a voice, especially one you recognize, goes against everything wired into you. And the longer you resist, the more convincing it becomes. Closer, clearer, more personal, until the doubt shifts. From, is that real? To, what if it is? That single thought is enough. That's the crack. That's where it gets in. And once it does, you don't need to hear it anymore, because you'll already be moving toward it. Survival chance, 3%. Not because escape is impossible, but because ignoring the call is. If you're still here, still listening, still thinking this is just a story, good. That means it hasn't used your name yet. Stay quiet. Stay still. And whatever you do, if something calls out to you tonight, don't answer.